Hey everyone, Aries here. I just want to say before we get started that I just created a subreddit for cryptid creatures and paranormal events and encounters and stuff like that. So if you like my kind of videos, feel free to follow it or subscribe to it, and I'll leave a link in the description below. If you're a YouTube creator that makes videos similar to the subject, feel free to post on there as well. And also give a lot of love to Swamp Dweller for helping me out with this video. Super appreciate him, and I hope you guys all enjoy. I love to go hiking. I go with my 3-year-old German Shepherd and let her go unleashed since we like to go to secluded places. Now I've been hiking all over Utah mountains and wanted a new hike that wasn't too far from me. I have an app that tells me about hikes near me, if it's a hard hike, reviews, and if it's dog friendly. Now I was scrolling through All Trail, looking for possibly something new, but I wasn't too hopeful. But to my delight, there was something new. I don't know why I don't remember the name of it, but I do remember it was at the bottom of the list, and it had one review, saying, "Good." I thought it was kind of strange, mostly because people love to review hikes and try to tell the city what they can do to improve the hikes and make it more safe. But I figured it wasn't a popular hike. So the next day, Kyrie and I pack up our stuff and went towards the hike. I always carry a first aid kit, extra food, a knife, and just emergency stuff in case I get lost. It's important to mention now that Kyrie eats a raw diet, meaning she eats raw meat, not cooked, and since we were going so early in the morning, I thought I could bring some with us. I put it in her blue backpack I made her wear, and decided when it was getting warmer we would stop to eat. Where I live, there's a long drive through the canyon, and many roads going towards the hike you'd like to go on. This one was a little farther than I'm used to, but I didn't care. It was new and I was excited, and so was Kyrie. She cries in the car until we get there. Now I was following the directions on my phone and saw that it had led me towards a thin road that was hidden. No wonder I hadn't heard of this place. It was hidden and far up the mountain. The road only fit one car, so the whole time I was so anxious that another car would come down and how I would handle that, but there never was. I never saw another car. When I got to the parking lot, if you could call it that, I noticed that there was only space for like 3 cars, all in a tight space. It was small, so I decided to park my car in the front facing towards the road. I thought maybe it was private property. I checked the app, but it didn't say anything about it. I shrugged it off, got Kyrie out, prepared us, and saw the trail. Now, even though I knew there wasn't anyone parked there, I kept Kyrie on a leash. I didn't know if there were bikers along the trail, but after 30 minutes or so, I didn't see anyone, and I decided to let her off leash. It was a steep hike for the first half, but it was beautiful. We were deep in the woods, and I felt at peace. I used to wear headphones when I hiked, but I don't anymore, so I was enjoying the natural sounds of the forest. It was still early in the morning, so I wore a light jacket and decided when it got warmer, I'd give Kyrie her breakfast. Now before you start to hate, I know bringing Kyrie's raw meat was absolutely stupid and ignorant of me. I had never seen a bear or wolf or anything, so I got cocky and just thought it was okay. I learned my lesson the bad way, so no need to tell me I was dumb. But honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you commented that. Now here is where we begin the bad part of the story. The trail finally stopped being steep and sort of an easy hike from here. When you got to the top, you could see through the trees a beautiful open meadow. On the other side of it, you could hear a river and a waterfall. The trail went around the meadow. The meadow was absolutely beautiful, with the mountains in the background and the sound of water. This hike was almost the most beautiful one I had ever been to. When Kyrie and I were sort of in the center of the meadow, she stopped right in front of me and looked towards it, Kyrie always walked ahead of me, and when she stopped, I stopped, since I trusted her judgment. Before I could look, the smell hit me first. You know, the typical rotting smell, but oh my God. Words cannot explain how bad it stunk. It burned my nose and started to make me tear up. I put my shirt over my nose, feeling nauseated, and looked over to where Kyrie was looking. In the middle of the meadow was a deer. Now I've only seen does, but never a male deer in person, but his antlers were huge. Have you ever seen Princess Mononoke? When he sees the deer spirit walking across the water and how big his antlers were? Almost like that. The beauty of the deer was amazing, but not enough to take away the disgusting smell that was making me sick. The deer was looking towards the mountains and away from me. I thought maybe Kyrie's food was going bad, so I checked, and it seemed fine. When I looked up again, the deer was looking towards our direction. I noticed that Kyrie's hackles went up at that, and she started to cry nervously. I've heard of Wendigos and Skinwalkers. I am Native American, so it's common for these creatures to be in our childhood stories. That, and also listening to scary stories on YouTube. Now when Kyrie did that, I got a bad feeling in my stomach. It was a Wendigo, and I knew that. These creatures were only a part of my stories to make me go to bed, not instructions of what to do. Plus, my grandmother was the only one with the stories and had passed away. She was the one with the experience, not my mom or anyone else. I glanced at Kyrie again when she cried and looked back towards the creature. It started to stand on its hind legs. Holy hell, it was tall, and it faced my direction. It started to walk towards me. I was going to run until I heard in my head,
"I am the one of this land."
Suddenly, it started to run towards me, full speed. I screamed, called Kyrie, and started to run. Kyrie was following behind me. I started to cry as I was running, since I could hear it catching up to me. It was loud. It was destroying everything it came in contact with to get to me. The adrenaline running through me was making me just focus on running. I didn't know where to go, so I just ran. The trail suddenly got smaller, and bushes and thorns started to appear, but I didn't feel them as they cut my arms. As I heard it get closer, it suddenly went to the left as I ran straight. I somehow had the balls to look back to see it was gone, but also Kyrie. "Kyrie?" I said, but right as I called out for her, the trail ended with a foot drop onto a patch of rocks. I hit my head, bleeding a bit. But again, I couldn't feel it that much and just got up. I looked towards the forest when I suddenly heard a loud cry from my right. It was Kyrie. "Kyrie!" I cried out. I stood up, crying and lost of what to do. I looked back to see a river leading up to the waterfall I had heard. Suddenly, a heavy weight ran into me, and we both fell back. I hit my head again on the back and looked up to see Kyrie. She had blood all over her. It was pouring from her neck. "Kyrie!" I shouted out. She was whimpering and breathing heavy. She still had her backpack on with some cuts in it. Before I had the chance to help her, a scream came from the forest. I looked back at the waterfall and somehow had the strength to pick up my 85-pound dog and carry her. I don't know where I was planning to go. I was just running to the waterfall as if it was a safe place. I was almost there when I heard the creature land on the rocks that I had earlier. I tripped at that and looked back to see it looking at me. Its eyes were black, or I think so. It could also be that there wasn't anything in there. I don't know. I took off Kyrie's backpack and threw it towards the monster, hoping it would take the meat and just leave us alone. I was scooting back towards the waterfall, crying as I did so, holding and dragging Kyrie with my left arm. I found that being so close to the creature made me literally weak to my knees. It walked over to me, taking huge steps. It looked so different than before. Before it looked like a deer, and now, as it crawled over to me, it looked like a monster. I don't know how else to describe this awful demon. I don't. I'm sorry. But I felt water hit my head hard as I reached the waterfall. I kept going until I was up against the wall. There was barely enough space where the water wasn't hitting Kyrie and our faces. She felt limp at this point. I could somewhat see the creature through the water, but still saw it coming towards me. It stood on its hind legs when it was close enough to me, watching me. The smell was so disgusting. I couldn't help but throw up in my mouth. It reached its arms out to grab me. I screamed so loud, I actually lost my voice. After I let out that scream, another scream came from the deep forest. The creature snapped its head almost completely backwards, looking towards the scream. The scream sounded like the one this one had let out earlier. I was still holding onto Kyrie, crying and screaming since its arm was so close. It looked back to me, pulling its arm away, and again said in my mind,
I am the one of this land.
With that, it took steps back, watching me, and went down the riverbank. It crawled on all fours, stopping next to Kyrie's backpack. It ripped it apart and pulled out the meat, eating it with the plastic that it was in. It suddenly screamed and ran towards the direction of the scream from earlier. When I thought it was gone, I stood up shakily and carried Kyrie towards the trail again. When I was running, I came across my backpack that I had left earlier and stopped. It was ripped apart, so I took off my jacket and wrapped it around Kyrie's neck where she was bleeding a lot. After that, I barely remember. All I remember is carrying Kyrie and driving down, screaming the whole way towards the emergency vet. They asked us what happened and I told them it was a bear. They called the ambulance since I had blood all over me, and they couldn't tell if it was mine or Kyrie's. Kyrie made it through surgery and had to have some stitches on her, along with the pad. It didn't really heal, and a huge bump grew on there. It had been infected, but eventually got better. She also had a bite mark on the top of her left eye, but that healed much better. They pulled out a 4-inch tooth. I don't have it because I couldn't even look at it, but they declared it from a bear, even though they said it looked weird. While I was waiting for Kyrie, I went to look up the trail on the app, and it was gone. I don't know why or how, but it was. I don't remember where it is either. That's all a blur.
Before I start, I should mention that I am half white, half Mexican male, and this story happened to me when I was 17 years old. My family went to California for a summer vacation, and to see the family we have out there. That year, we decided to go camping in a certain park in Northern California for a few days, and being a Phoenix native, it was a much-needed break from the 120-degree heat. All was good for the first few days, until the second to last night there. A group of 5 to 6 of us were sitting by the campfire at 1 in the morning, when we noticed the forest goes dead silent around us. As we all look around at each other, questioningly, we hear the pained, blood-curdling scream of a woman saying, No, ring from the trees to the left of our camp. Not knowing what was wrong or what was going on, we kept our ears open and stayed on guard. A few moments later, we hear the same noise again, but somehow different, more inhuman this time, like a voice being played off of a speaker. We instantly recognized it as the voice of the woman from before. Horrified, we quietly all went to our tents to hide. Eventually, we all fell into a very uneasy sleep. I jolted awake at 3 in the morning, desperately needing to pee. Thankfully, we were across from the outhouses, so after a quick sprint over into the outhouses and relieving myself, I hear what sounded like scratching on a tin metal roof. I immediately froze, remembering the inhuman howl from earlier that night, hoping they weren't related. Armed with only my phone, I watched the next half an hour tick down, either waiting for the sun to rise or for the sound of the scraping to stop. Suddenly, the light in the bathroom cut out. The timer for the lights had gone out, leaving me in the dark. With the faintest bit of light threatening to peek its head over from the horizon, I decided to make my break back to the tent. I made it across the dirt road to the camp when I heard it again. That woman's shriek, but not loud. It had the same intensity and inhuman artificialness, but it was like barely a whisper. Foolishly, I turned around and perched on the metal roof. I saw was a 7-foot, pale gray creature with 3-inch claws on all fours and deep sunken eyes staring at me a mere 25 feet away. Its flesh was tightly stretched across its bones. It was completely hairless and lacked any form of genitalia. I was frozen solid as we looked at each other until it took to its right and saw the light creeping up. It stared at me and let out one more agonizing cry that had me haunted till this very day. It sent one last soul-stabbing stare before it vanished into the early morning. As I lay back into my tent silently sobbing and trying to fall back asleep, I hear the faint echo of the thing's cry. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all that night and refused to set foot in those woods again. As we left the campsite that day, we saw a homeless-looking woman standing at the side of the road going down the mountain. I didn't make eye contact, but I knew she was staring at me. Once we passed, I casually looked over my shoulder to see if she was there, and she wasn't. But there was an owl who flew close to the ground to where she was.
I've been living in Brabant, the Netherlands, for a while, a few kilometers before the border of Belgium. A few weeks ago, I went on holiday to Wiegel in Belgium. A few family members of mine live there, so I stayed overnight. I'm very fond of walking, and I do that every day. I went for a walk on a Tuesday evening. After having walked for about half an hour, I walked over a bridge. It was very quiet. I found this not really strange, but peaceful. I stopped just at the end of the bridge to get some water from my backpack. At that moment, I heard something that sounded like iron across something. It was like an iron chain. I heard it very softly the first time and thought it was coming from afar, so I thought nothing of it. After a few seconds, I heard it for the second time. This time it sounded very close, so I wondered what it was. There was nobody around me as far as I knew. I wasn't worried, it was just strange. I then thought it was just a homeless person or something that was under the bridge. After drinking and enjoying nature for a moment, I heard it again. I think now it was around 10 p.m. I heard the same weird sound under the bridge. I decided to keep listening until I heard some sort of howl. I remember falling back because I was so shocked. It was a weird whine, something that you would expect from a dog or a wolf. It sounded very heavy but dull. I was very shocked because I couldn't identify the sound. I actually stopped because I was so scared. At that moment, I looked down. I saw a kind of dog-like creature that walked on 2 legs. It was huge, so I knew it wasn't a dog. It was black and had some kind of small wings on its back. It had a kind of chain on its leg. I remember correctly that it was his left leg. I think there was water under the bridge because it was wet. At that moment, he turned around and looked into my eyes. They were dark eyes. His head looked a bit like a big wolf, and I knew I had to run. I stumbled a few times and sprained my ankle, I have never seen anything like this. I told one person that lived in the neighborhood, and he said it really was what I saw. He mentioned a name, but I can't think of it anymore. And I've thought about sharing this for a long time, because I have nightmares about it.
So I grew up in South Jersey, very close to the Pine Barrens. The Pine Barrens are basically a stretch of wilderness across southern New Jersey that holds a huge aquifer underneath it. The aquifer exists because the soil is extremely sandy, allowing for rapid draining of rainwater into the aquifer below. People here have no doubt that the Jersey Devil is real. So much so that part of the Pine Barren unit in 6th grade science included the legend of the Jersey Devil, what he probably looks like, and different significant sightings that people in the area have seen over the years. You know, typical public school learning. All of the Jersey Devil talk peaked when we went to Mount Misery for our 6th grade class trip. Basically, we spent 3 days in the heart of the Pine Barrens with our teachers and classmates cabin camping. We did a ton of random nature stuff, but everything came to a head on the last night there. The grade was split into 3 groups that would rotate through 3 different activities: ghost stories, s'mores, and a hayride. My group went through the activities in this exact order. The ghost stories were pretty lame. They were told by one of the English teachers and was definitely meant to freak us out a little bit. None of the stories mentioned the devil at all, though. The sun began to set as we made some s'mores for our second activity. Both of the other groups got to experience the hayride during the day, but by the time we got it, the sun had fully set. Our group loaded into the back of the hayride, which consisted of a tractor pulling a large trailer filled with hay and straw. A couple teachers joined the group, with my homeroom teacher sitting 3 people away from me, towards the front of the trailer. The tractor turned its headlights on, and we were off into the woods. Honestly, there wasn't much to see. We traveled down some sandy dirt roads surrounded by trees in the pitch-black darkness. This went on for about 10 or so minutes until we finally came out to a clearing. The clearing can best be described as a bunch of sand dunes, not uncommon for the Pine Barrens, with a small pool of water at the lowest point between a couple of the dunes. The tractor pedaled along across the side of the clearing towards the dirt on the other side. Everything was fine until one of the kids on the side closest to the pool of the water shouted, "What's that thing over there drinking out of the water?" We all rushed over to look, and saw what looked to be a deformed deer. It was drinking out of the water like any other deer would, but it looked like it had long scratches along its side and had weird deformities sticking out of its back. I could see how someone could mistake these for wings, but it looked more like a strange, large black growth to me. My first thought was this was something like a teacher trying to scare us or something. After all, we literally learned about the Jersey Devil like 2 weeks prior, and we just listened to a bunch of ghost stories about an hour ago. My opinion was changed when I saw the panic in my homeroom teacher's eyes. She pushed me and a couple of other kids away from that side of the trailer and frantically was yelling at the tractor guy to speed up. She tried to hide it, but I saw her wipe tears away throughout the rest of the ride. I never got to see if that deer thing reacted to us because my teacher was holding me down away from the ride. The driver gunned it, and the teachers towards the back of the trailer frantically scanned the woods behind us with flashlights for the rest of the ride. When we got to the camp, half of us rolled out of the trailer with laughter. Surely this was a prank that the teachers put on for all the groups, right? But after talking to the other kids, we realized we were the only ones that saw this creature. I paid close attention to my teacher, and saw her pull a couple of other teachers aside, and they exchanged frightened looks as she told them what we saw. My sister went on the same class trip 2 years later, and they didn't even do the hayride activity at all. This happened years ago, but I've never been able to shake that encounter. The closest thing I've seen to what I saw was when Paranormal State tried to find the Jersey Devil themselves. They captured an image of a weird-looking deer on thermal cameras. I don't know if it's the Jersey Devil, but they definitely saw the same freaked-up thing that I did.
Before anything, a bit of background. I'm not willing to give out my name or the county I live, but I live in Colorado. I'm posting this simply because I'm not absolutely sure. This happened when I was 6. Our family was taking a trip up to the mountains, specifically a cabin owned by my aunt and my uncle's family. Near the cabin was a discontinued railroad project, which even tunneled through the mountain, When this happened, it was near the end of the winter months. The result was me spending much more time researching cryptids. The entire day had felt off for me. We went on a hike and I couldn't hear any birds or animals, and when we were turning around, I started getting excited because I smelled something coppery, and I thought it might be copper. The only thing that deterred me is that I felt like if I went to find it, I probably wouldn't come back. For me, it's like a sixth sense. If I feel it, I don't do what I would. I didn't think it was blood or anything related, but I felt it wasn't safe to chase the smell. This hike was on the eastern entrance of the discontinued railroad tunnel. Then back to the cabin. My parents wouldn't let me go in the tunnel whatsoever, as in, the second I stepped within 10 feet, they were getting uneasy and telling me to back away from where the rocks might fall. The walk back was intense and quiet. I was the only one trying to initiate conversation. As we were just leaving the edge is when I smelled the copper. As we walked back, my dad kept glancing behind us at random intervals. It was only that night that I actually noticed anything while I was there. There was one bedroom, perfect for a family of 4, but it had one window. I never trusted that window, and I was right not to. That night, my parents were up much longer than usual, but stayed silent. After they fell asleep, I was wondering about their weird behavior, and around 2 a.m., I felt something. The room cooled down, and I felt horribly cold for a moment. I felt pure dread, and along with the chill, I could almost feel what seemed like hunger of some sort. It was burning my face at an angle from the window. Whatever it was, it knew I was awake, and it knew I could tell that it was there. So I got up as high as I could and jumped off the top of the bunk where I was supposed to sleep. Then I turned on a lamp and pointed it at the window while it was in my hands. Whatever it was had the mutual feeling of, no, I don't like this one. It was pale in the light, and my fear probably made me the same color. All that I could see in the window was a nearly white head with pits for eyes, no lips, slightly larger and sharper than normal, blood-stained teeth. It was also thin, yet had broad shoulders and a single, blood-red hand, with abnormally long fingers that ended in needle-like points. A few seconds after the light hit it, it opened its mouth and let out a muffled scream, blocked slightly by the window, then vanished to the right. The scream woke everyone up, and I was still standing in the dark, pointing a lamp at the window, looking horrified. My parents finally got me to sleep. Don't really know how they managed that. But the next day, while we were heading out, I looked at the window from the outside and realized something even more horrifying. This thing had to be at least 8 feet tall just to have been able to look at the bottom of the window, because there was a ditch around the end of the cabin. We took one last hike around 9 a.m. When we looked back into the tunnel, the rocks in the tallest pile had shifted. There was now a deer antler sitting at the top of the shifted pile, and there were now pools of shiny liquid in the cave. The scent of copper was prominent in the area. Next winter, 3 friends and I are going back to the cabin to go hunting. If I don't post or comment after that, I will leave the coordinates to be posted in the comments and a note before we go. I will respond and post until then, hopefully.